By the time Daniel Mercer reached St. Mark's Hospital, the rain had turned the parking lot into a sheet of black glass. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, with both hands on the steering wheel. The dashboard clock read 2:13 a.m. He had ignored 3 calls from the hospital before finally answering the 4th. And now he could still hear the nurse's careful voice repeating the same words in his head. Your sister is stable. Stable was a word hospitals used when they didn't know what else to say. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. The sleepy volunteer at the desk pointed him towards the long-term neurocare ward. Daniel followed pale green lines on the floor until he found a room 9.5, open, dim, except for the blue glow of the monitors. Emily lay in bed with her hair brushed back from her face. Somehow, somebody had tucked a blanket around her shoulders with a kindness that made his throat tighten. She looked awake. Her eyes were open, but the nurse had been right. She was not there. Daniel stepped closer. Em? Nothing. Her chest rose and fell again. The machine beside her traced the slow, steady lines. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, unblinking, untroubled. A man stood near the window with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up. He appeared to be in his late 50s with gray hair, thin gold-rimmed glasses. He held a tablet under one arm, like he belonged in the room, more than Daniel did. You're the brother, the man said. Daniel turned. And who are you? I'm Dr. Walter Bell. Her doctor? Not exactly. Daniel looked back at Emily. Then why are you here? Bell took a moment before answering. Because your sister is the 7th case in the city. Daniel stared at him. Case of what? Bell's face settled into the tired stillness of someone who had practiced this conversation too many times and still hated it every time. No trauma, no stroke, no seizure activity that we can identify. No structural damage to the brain. Biologically, she is functioning. Neurologically, she should be conscious. But she isn't. No, she's not. Daniel stepped forward towards the bed and touched Emily's hand. It was warm. He squeezed gently, then harder. Emily, come on, wake up. Nothing. Belle moved beside him. She checked herself into urgent care yesterday, complaining of headaches, missing time, and a sensation that she had described as distance. She said sometimes she felt as though someone had stepped out of her while her body kept moving. Daniel swallowed. She didn't tell me any of that. People don't say these things out loud unless they have to. Daniel stared at his sister's blank eyes. What are you telling me? Belle was quiet long enough for the monitors to become aware of their own answer. Then he said, we found something 2 months ago. We thought this was going to change in medicine. Daniel looked at him, and Belle glanced down at Emily. Now, I think this is going to change everything. Outside, the rain tapped against the window in soft, steady bursts. Inside room 9, Emily kept breathing as though nothing had happened. Daniel did not sleep. At dawn, Belle led him below the hospital through secure doors and a private elevator that required both a keycard and a thumbprint. The basement levels gave way to a polished concrete hallways, glass partitions, and sealed labs humming with hidden machinery. This isn't part of St. Mark's, Daniel said. No, Belle replied. The hospital leases the upper structure. This facility belongs to the Rainier Institute. Daniel had heard of it. Everyone had. A quiet government contract, deep space telemetry, exotic matter research. The kind of place people mentioned with lowered voices and bad guesses. A woman met with him at the end of the corridor. She was younger than Belle, maybe 40, with dark blonde hair tied back, and a face sharpened by exhaustion rather than age. Daniel Mercer, Belle said. This is Dr. Claire Hollow. She offered a hand. I'm sorry about your sister. She shook it, but only because politeness was easier than anger. They brought him into the lab with a chamber at its center, a transparent cylinder ringed with silver coils. Inside floated a single speck of light. Not bright, not dramatic, a pale mote drifting in place like dust caught in a beam of sunlight. Daniel frowned. What am I looking at here? Claire touched the screen beside the chamber. Data scrolled upward in layered graphs. That, she said, is what we are calling an SP. Which stands for? Bell answered. A soul particle. Daniel let out a short breath. That might have become a laugh if there had been anything funny in the room. You brought me down here for that? We didn't name it for poetry, Claire said. We named it because we ran out of more comfortable terms. She tapped the screen again. The chamber magnified the mote. It wasn't really drifting. It was more like trembling or vibrating in a way that made Daniel's eyes ache if he stared at it too long. It was first detected during an entanglement mapping project, Claire said. We were tracking persistent quantum correlations through vacuum space. We found patterns that should not have existed. Stable pairs with no measurable partner. Every time we isolated one, the paired state vanished into coordinates we could not reach. Daniel folded his arms. So you found a weird particle? Bell nodded. A naturally occurring one, ancient, probably everywhere. Although sparse, passing through matter, it's harmless. Until, Claire looked at him, we discovered that every living being had one anchored inside them. Daniel glanced at the mote again. No, he said. Yes, Bell said. Claire crossed into another station and brought up a scan. Daniel saw the outline of a human body overlaid with organ maps and a nervous system tracings. In the center of the chest, slightly left to the sternum, a faint point of light pulsed like a star under the skin. It's not located there physically, Claire said. Not exactly. That's just where the interaction becomes measurable in ordinary space. Daniel's mouth had gone dry. And dead people? Bell said nothing. Claire answered, the particle remains, but it changes. She brought up 2 more scans side by side. The living scan pulsed, thin tendrils of light branching into the body like roots through soil. The dead scan showed the same point, but dimmer, looser, untethered. Inert, Claire said. Daniel looked from one image to the next. You're saying this thing is the difference between alive and dead? No, Bell said softly. We are saying it's the difference between aware and inert. Claire switched the screen again. More scans. Animals this time. A dog, a bird, a mouse. The same point of light in each. Daniel's stomach tightened. All life? As far as we can tell, she said. He thought Emily upstairs, breathing in her bed, nobody home behind her eyes. What happened to my sister? Neither Bell nor Claire answered right away. Then Bell said, that's a question that turned this from discovery into a crisis. He reached for a cupboard tray on a nearby counter and pulled back the cloth. Underneath sat a glass slide. On the slide, under a microscope camera, something moved. It looked almost delicate at first, a transparent filament, no longer than a human cell, curling and uncurling with slow intention. Not swimming, not crawling, folding through dimensions. Daniel's brain did not want to follow that line of thought. The camera shifted focus. And for an instant, the thing seemed to be both there and elsewhere, a tiny shape dragging impossible angles behind it. Daniel took a step back. What is that? Claire's voice was steady. That, she said, is what we found wrapped around the particles. The first public leak happened 12 hours later. Daniel was in the Institute cafeteria with coffee he couldn't taste. Every screen in the room changed at once. A studio anchor, too polished to sound real, stared in the camera with professional alarm. Unnamed sources inside the Rainier Institute have confirmed the existence of what researchers are privately calling soul particles. The cafeteria conversation stopped completely. The report moved fast. Hidden labs, consciousness studies, 7 unexplained hospitalizations, phrases pulled from internal memos without context, and arranged for maximum damage. Inert post-conscious states, parasitic entanglement structures, potential implications for personalhood. By the time the segment ended, half of the room was already on their phones. Claire came in hard from the corridor. "We just lost containment." Bell stood at the table with the slow calm of a man who had expected fire, just not the timing. "Press office? Overrun? Security? Trying?" Bell looked at Daniel. "You should just go home." Daniel almost laughed. "To what?" No one answered. The rest of the day unfolded like a building coming apart floor by floor. Video clips flooded online from people claiming they had known this all along. Pastors declared this as proof of the soul. Atheists declared it as proof that consciousness was only an infection-driven machinery. Spiritualists reinvented themselves in real time. Market analysis talked about morality distribution, as if human beings were just a stock trend. By evening, the first protesters gathered beyond the Institute's gates. "Let the dead rest. Don't cleanse us. You are not my God." Daniel stayed because Emily was still upstairs and because leaving felt too much like surrender. Late that night, Claire found him in the observation room outside Lab 3. "You should sleep," she said. He didn't turn. "You first." She stood beside him looking through the glass at the technicians working around a containment unit. "I've had worse weeks." He finally looked at her. "You people actually called this a parasite privately, because that's what it is." She rested one hand against the rail. "It attaches to the particle. It forces entanglement, stability. When it anchors the whole structure to matter, once anchored, it begins building a host system around itself." Daniel stared at her. "Are you saying our bodies are something it grows?" "Yes," she said. He felt suddenly cold. Human bodies, yes. His mind went to every hand he had ever shaken, every face he had ever loved. His mother laughing at Thanksgiving, Emily at age 12 with a broken front tooth, himself at 6 looking in a mirror and leaning for the first time that the thing in the glass was actually him. Or maybe not him. Maybe only structure assembled by something microscopic and cosmic and hungry. Claire's expression did not soften, but her voice did. "I know." "Do you?" She looked tired enough to be honest. "My son asked me this morning if I was still his mother." Daniel looked away. "In some cases," Claire said, "the parasite burns out naturally at death. The particle detaches and returns to an inert state. But if the host body dies too soon, before the parasite's cycle completes, it appears to carry its anchored pattern into a new developing host." Daniel just stared at her and said, "Reincarnation?" She gave the smallest nod. "Yes, that's our working model." He let out a breath that sounded like it hurt. "You say these things like they belong in some kind of lab report. That's the only way I know how to keep saying them." The intercom above them crackled. "Dr. Harlow, to isolation room 2 immediately." Claire swore under her breath, moved to the door. Daniel followed without thinking. Isolation 2 was already crowded when they arrived. A young man in the hospital scrubs sat up on the bed, wrists strapped down, eyes bloodshot, wide open. Daniel recognized him from the ward upstairs. "This is case 4. The man's head jerked toward the observation glass. "Don't let them take it out." A nurse tried to calm him, but he bucked hard against the straps. "Do you hear me? Do not let them touch it. I can feel it slipping." Claire stepped to the speaker. "Mark, listen to me. No one is touching you." "That's a lie," Mark said. "They cleaned Hannah." The room went still. Claire's hand froze over the controls. Who is Hannah? The man laughed, and there was something wrong with it. A crack through the middle. Room 12. She came back empty. Daniel looked at Claire. Claire looked at the chart. No room 12 existed on that floor. Mark's eyes rolled toward the ceiling, as if he was listening to someone above them. When he spoke again, his voice had gone oddly calm. "It doesn't want to die," he whispered. "It's scared." Then his body slackened. Monitor screamed. Staff came rushing in. Daniel stood rooted outside the glass while Claire barked orders and Belle appeared seemingly from nowhere beside him. "What did he mean?" Daniel asked. Belle did not answer the question Daniel had asked. Instead, he said, "We may have been wrong about what the infection does." Daniel turned to him. Belle's eyes stayed on the man convulsing behind the glass. "We thought it only generated consciousness," he said. "And now?" Belle's reflection in the glass looked older than the man himself. "Now I think consciousness may be what it feels like from the inside." Room 12 was in the lower level, past a biometric lock Daniel had not been meant to know about. Belle took him anyway. "No records," Daniel said as they walked. "Officially, she isn't here." Because? Because if the public sees her before we understand the mechanism, cities will burn. The woman in the bed was young, 20 maybe, brown hair, freckles across the bridge of her nose. She lay with her eyes open, just like Emily, except this was worse somehow. Her gaze moved, it tracked motion, it blinked when the light changed, her fingers flexed if you touched her palm. When Belle held a cup of water with the straw to her lips, she drank. But there was no decision in any of it, no hesitation, no preference, just systems responding because the systems still worked. "This is Hannah Boss," Belle said, astrophysicist intern. She volunteered for a low-level resonance separation test before we understood the risk. Daniel looked at him sharply. "You did this to her?" Belle's jaw tightened. "We're trying to detach the parasite without destabilizing the particle. And instead," Claire spoke from behind him, "we succeeded." Daniel turned. "This is succeeded?" She came to stand at the foot of the bed. Her body is healthy. Her neural activity is orderly. But the anchored complexity is gone. The particle is still there, it's just clean. Daniel looked at Hannah and back at Claire. You murdered her." Claire did not flinch intentionally. "That's supposed to help?" Well, no," Belle said quietly. "We ended the infection. Everything that made her self ended with it." Daniel stared at Hannah's empty face. Outside, somewhere above the concrete ceiling, a siren wailed and faded. "You knew this before Emily came in," he said. Claire's silence was answer enough. "You knew what this could do." "We knew enough to stop the trial," Belle said. "We did stop it, but not soon enough?" "No." Daniel walked to the bed. Hannah's eyes followed him with the vacant passion of a camera. He lifted a hand, and she flinched, not from fear, only reflex. The motion hurt to watch. "If this gets out," he said, "people are going to start calling consciousness a disease." Belle's laugh was small and bitter. "They already are." As if on cue, Claire's tablet buzzed. She checked it, face hardening. "Too late," she said. She turned the screen downward. A live feed showed downtown crowds under giant screen displays. Someone had hijacked the billboards that read, "Consciousness is a parasitic occupation. Cleanse the human condition." Below it, people were cheering. Daniel stared at the screen. "They want this?" "Some do," Claire said. "Some think freedom means becoming empty." Belle rubbed her hand over her face. "And some will decide emptiness is mercy." Daniel looked at Emily in his mind, breathing in room 9, and then Hannah breathing here. The same motion, the same warm body, the same impossible absence. "What happens if somebody builds a weapon out of this?" he asked. Neither scientist answered. That frightened him more than anything else they had ever said. On the third day, Daniel found Emily sitting up in bed. For a fraction of a second, hope exploded through him. So hard, it almost made him black out. Then he saw her face. Her eyes tracked him. Her mouth, parted, had been hollowed out. She turned when the nurse guided her shoulder. She swallowed when given water. She blinked when Daniel said her name. Nothing more. He backed into the hallway and nearly collided with Belle. She's like Hannah now. Belle looked in the room, grief passing so quickly over his features that Daniel almost missed it. Yes, you said the infection burned out at death. Daniel's voice shook with controlled violence. Emily isn't dead. Belle lowered his voice. We think these are stages, partial collapses, forced separation, and spontaneous burnout. We think, yes. Daniel stepped closer. No more theory. Tell me if there's a way back. Belle hesitated. That was enough. There is. There might be, Belle corrected. Daniel grabbed him by the front of his shirt. Then tell me. Belle did not resist. We've seen evidence that the parasite doesn't simply vanish when the host goes inert. Under certain circumstances, it remains entangled with the particle's lost active state. Belle's grip loosened. Claire approached from the hall, hearing the last part. Walter! Belle ignored her. The self may not be destroyed immediately. It may just be displaced. Daniel stared at him. Well then where? Where is it? Belle's answer came almost as a whisper. Along a missing line. Daniel let it go slowly. The unknown point. Claire arrived beside them, furious, in a way Daniel had not seen. We are not doing this in the hallway, she said. Belle turned to her. He deserves the truth. He deserves the facts. Belle's voice sharpened. The resonant echoes matched pre-collapse identity structures. Claire shook her head. Fragments. Persistent fragments, he corrected. Ghost signatures in a field we barely understand. Daniel looked between them. What are you saying? Claire exhaled through her nose. When the parasite destabilizes, an active state appears to recede. It may not be gone. It may be trapped elsewhere. The particle is entangled. Daniel said nothing. Belle said it for him. Your sister might still exist. The hallway itself seemed to tilt. Claire crossed her arms tightly, as if holding herself together. And if she does, we have no proof she's coherent. No proof she's reachable. And no proof bringing her back wouldn't kill the body or destroy what's left. But it is possible, Daniel said. Claire looked at Emily through the doorway and then said, yes. He stepped back, thinking too fast, too wildly. Then do it. It's not that simple. Then make it simple. Belle spoke carefully now. The only way to follow the entanglement is to amplify the particle's paired resonance. To do that, we need an infected particle stable enough to map the line. Daniel frowned. You have those. Not like we need, Claire said. The field collapses under observation. The parasite resists extraction, and once the host degrades too far, the signal is useless. Daniel understood before either of them said it. You need the subject alive. Belle did not answer. Claire did. We need someone still conscious, early stage, strong anchor. Daniel looked from one to the other, and suddenly the whole world felt rotten with secrets. How many people are you considering? No one spoke. He took a step back. How many? Claire's face went hard, not cruel, just braced. More and more every day. That evening, the first cleansing clinic opened in Nevada. By morning, there were more than 5. No government admitted authorized them. No agency claimed jurisdiction. They appeared in a warehouse districts and converted surgery centers and church basements. Advertised through encrypted channels and live streams, filled with smiling men and women saying the same thing. You are not your infection. You can be freed. Daniel watched one of the streams from the Institute break the room, while the janitor silently unplugged the ventilating machine, as it left humming dead in the corner. The woman on screen laid down beneath the circular apparatus and whispered that she was ready. Her husband held her hand and cried with relief. The screen cut to static before the procedure ended. 2 hours later, someone posted a video of the recovery room. The woman sat up and stared blankly ahead while her husband screamed her name. The video spread so fast the networks couldn't keep up. By midnight, the cleansing clinics had become bomb targets. By dawn, people were lining up outside them anyway. The city changed in a week. People stopped looking at strangers in the eye for too long. Churches filled, so did bars. Parents pulled children out of schools. A new argument bloomed in every home, every office, every studio panel, every feed. If consciousness was an infection, was suffering just inflammation? If death was a parasite burning out, was grief the only attachment to a symptom? If a clean body still walked and breathed, what exactly had been lost? One afternoon, Daniel rode the elevator down to a secured guard named Owen, who had started carrying a wooden cross in one hand and a sidearm in the other. "My wife says I should get cleansed if the government mandates it," Owen said, staring at the floor numbers. "Says maybe whatever comes after this is peace." Daniel said nothing. Owen swallowed. "I told her if she does it first, I will never forgive her." The doors opened. The lower lab was in chaos. Technicians ran between stations. Bell shouted for field containment. Claire stood over a console, pale with concentration. On the central platform sat 6 men in hospital gowns, each strapped into a reclining chair, each staring ahead with the same vacant stillness. Daniel stopped in his doorway. "What is this?" Claire looked up. "A group admission from a cleansing cell in Kansas. The procedure failed halfway." Bell corrected without looking up from his readout. "Succeeded halfway." One of the men began to hum. The sound was low, toneless, but the others joined in almost immediately. 6 empty men sat with open mouths producing one shared vibration. Daniel felt the hair on his arms rise. "What are they doing?" "No idea," Claire said. The humming deepened. Monitors along the wall flickered. The chamber containing the isolated soul particles trembled and began to flash. Bale stared at the numbers. "They're coupling the field." "How?" Claire snapped. Daniel moved closer despite every instinct telling him not to. The 6 men turned their heads in perfect unison. Not at Claire, not at Bell, but at him. The humming stopped. One of the men smiled. It wasn't a human smile, not really. It arrived too quickly, stretched too evenly, and vanished the second it had been observed, whatever purpose it had. Then all 6 spoke together. "Daniel." The room froze. Daniel's skin went cold. How do they know my name? All 6 again moved their mouths at once. "She's near." Bell lunged to the speaker system. "Who is near?" The men ignored him. Their eyes stayed locked on Daniel. "She is caught where the brightness of things cross." Daniel took another step forward before Claire caught his arm. "Don't." He barely heard her. "Emily." The 6 men inhaled at the same time. And every screen in the lab turned white. The humming came back louder now, layered with frequencies Daniel felt in his teeth. The lights overhead burst one by one in sharp blue pops. Someone screamed. Claire shoved Daniel behind a steel console, just as the containment ring blew apart inside a shower of sparks. The men in the chairs arched against their restraints, mouths wide open, sound pouring through them like radio through broken speakers. And inside the noise, for half a second, Daniel heard his sister crying. Then the power died. When the emergency lights came on, dim and red, the 6 men hung limp in their chairs, empty again. One by one, their monitors flatlined. After the incident with the 6 men, Bell stopped pretending caution would save them. "We have a repeated contact phenomena," he said in the secure conference room. His voice was hoarse and tie was crooked. Eyes were bloodshot. Not full communication, but an intentional response. Claire stood opposite of him with his palms on the table. "We have a catastrophic resonance event caused by a partially cleansed host whose nervous systems acted as a chorus of amplifiers." Bell gave her a tired look. "You always make the apocalypse sound like paperwork." She ignored that. "Even displaced identity states are real. We don't know who or what we contacted." Daniel sat at the far end listening because they had finally stopped trying to keep him out of the room. Mostly because he refused to leave it. Bell keyed up the footage of the failed lab event. The 6 men synchronized turn. The impossible smile. When the audio waveform of their shared voice, another waveform, one of Emily's voicemail messages months earlier. The pattern overlap wasn't exact, but it was close enough to make Daniel feel sick. Claire stared at the screen. "That proves resonance imitation, not identity." "Maybe," Bell said. "Walter, maybe not." He switched to a star map. Not real stars, Daniel realized after a moment. Coordinates rendered from entangled gradients. The map looked wrong in a way abstract things often do when forced to resemble the physical universe. "There," Bell said, pointing at a knot of crossing lines. "Every particle towards this field in the same unreachable region. Not a place in ordinary space, a kind of shared convergence." "The missing line," Daniel said. Bell nodded. "If the active state is displaced there during a disturbance, then the question is not whether the self survives. The question is how long." Claire straightened slowly. "You're talking about recovery?" "I'm talking about an attempt." "With what subject?" Bell didn't answer. Daniel did. "Me." Claire turned immediately. "Absolutely not. No." Bell's expression did not change, which told Daniel that the thought had crossed his mind too. "I'm early exposure," Daniel said. "I spent days around unstable fields, active particles, partially collapsed host." "That is not the same as symptomatic infection drift," Claire said. "Scan me." "We already did." "Daniel, you scanned me?" "Bell said yesterday while you were sleeping in the family room." Daniel stood so fast the chair scraped it hard against the wall and the floor. "And?" Claire looked down. Bell answered, "You begun to anchor irregularly." The room became very quiet. Daniel sat back down because his knees briefly forgot how to work. "What does that mean?" Claire's voice was very careful now. "It means your particle is under strain. We don't know if it's an exposure or onset, or may develop symptoms or not. How long? We don't know." He laughed once, empty as metal. "That's everybody's answer in this building." Bell changed the display. Daniel's own scan appeared, his chest lit by a wavering thin point of distortion spreading through it like cracks in a glass. "If we use you as a bridge," Bell said, "we may be able to trace the line while your state remains active." Claire's head snapped toward him. "Absolutely not." Bell met her anger head on. "We are losing dozens now, maybe hundreds by tomorrow. If displaced consciousness persists, then cleansing isn't a release, it's exile. It could also be annihilation. Then we prove it one way or another." Claire looked at Daniel. "This procedure could strip you clean. It could leave you like your sister." Daniel thought Emily lying in the room 9, though the thought of 6 dead men calling his name with one voice, thought of crowds cheering for emptiness. Because the truth hurt too much to carry. "If I do nothing," he said, "then nothing happens." Claire held his gaze. "The world learns how to erase itself." They prepared the chamber at midnight. The Institute had gone quiet in that battle, the way buildings do when everyone inside knows history has narrowed to a point. Beyond the reinforced walls, protest chants drifted from the streets in scattered waves. Someone had started a bonfire in the parking structure. Security reports cracking through the radios, and were ignored unless they involved the power grid. Daniel sat in a medical chair while Claire attached contact leads to his neck and sternum. Her hands were steady. "Tell me the truth," he said. "I have been. The whole truth." She paused. "I don't think the parasite is separate from what we call a person anymore." He looked at her. "I think," she said quietly, "that over the time, the infection and the host stopped being invader and victim and become one process, one thing. Whatever enters the particle at the beginning doesn't stay foreign." Daniel tried to digest that. "So we're not being piloted by monsters?" "No." She met his eyes. "I think we are the scar tissue." Bill entered the control room carrying a headset rig, a tablet full of last chances. "Ready?" "No," Clarice said. Daniel nodded anyway. They eased him into the chamber. The transparent walls sealed with a soft hiss. Beyond them, Bill and Claire took their places behind the glass. At first, the pulses felt like a migraine wrapped in ice. The second wave felt like falling sideways. Daniel gripped the chair arms. The light strobed around him in concentric rings. The point in his chest seemed suddenly enormous. A sun trying to turn inside out. Claire's voice came through the speakers. "Daniel, stay with me. Describe what you perceive." He swallowed. "Noise. Visual? Not exactly." The third pulse hit. The chamber vanished. Not disappeared, but opened. Daniel found himself standing at a dark expanse filled with lines of light stretching into impossible distances. They crossed and recrossed in silent webs, each strand trembling with colors he had no names for. Some lines carried memories rather than photons. As they brushed past him, he caught flashes of what were his, not a child's hand in snow, a dawning grasp, a wedding laughter, the hot metallic taste of fear. He turned slowly. There was no floor, but he did not fall. "Claire," no answer. His own voice seemed smaller here, as though sound were embarrassed to exist. Something moved along one of the crossing lines. He thought at first it was another person. Then he saw too many joints, too many shifts in angle, and the thing unfolded from the light, like a thought learning to wear a shape. It was microscopic and colossal at once, a thread-like organism magnified by context into something almost holy, almost repulsive. Its body was made translucent loops feeding through one another. Inside those loops flickered scenes from living worlds, forests, oceans, cities, cells dividing, eyes opening. A parasite, or one of them. Daniel backed away, but the line gave and carried him forward instead. The creature did not chase, it observed. From elsewhere beyond, he heard sobbing. "Emily?" The web brightened. A new strand pulsed. Daniel followed it, and the vast organism folded aside, as though making room. He found her kneeling on nothing, arms wrapped around herself, face wet with tears. Not her body, not exactly. More like her pattern given shape by a memory. "Emily!" She looked up. The relief was on her face, hit him harder than anything else ever had. "Danny?" He dropped beside her. "I'm here." Her hands seized his shoulders. They felt real enough to break him. "Don't let them cleanse me." "I won't." "There are others," she said, turning her head as if listening to a crowd just beyond sight. "So many, some fading, some screaming, some don't remember what they were." Daniel looked past her and saw them at last, dim forms caught on neighboring lines, thousands maybe, stretching into the distance like lanterns trapped in fishing nets. His stomach turned. "Is this what the cleansing does?" Emily nodded, shaking. "It knocks us out of our body before the burn's done. We get stuck here. Can I bring you back?" His face changed. Hope and terror fought there together. "I don't know." The great filament creature drifted closer behind him. Emily's expression tightened. It hears through the lines, she whispered. Daniel turned. What are you? The thing did not speak in words. The answer arrived as a layer feeding. Not predator, not purpose. Process. A drifting universe full of inert paired particles. A contamination older than the stars. The parasite latching onto, not to destroy, but to survive instead. Dead matter by building complexity around itself. Nervous systems, minds, selves, entire ecologies flowering accidentally from replication. Consciousness not as design, but as a side effect. Yet somewhere in the endless ages of the side effect had begun to look back. Daniel felt the enormity of it, and hated it, and pitied it all at once. You made us. No. The feeling corrected him. We became. He looked at Emily, at the trapped lights beyond her, then let them go. The response came like winter. Cannot. Won't. Need. The lines around them trembled. Somewhere far away in the chamber, alarms began to bleed through like thunder. Emily gripped Daniel harder. Danny! The organism folded inward, and for the first time he sensed something like fear from it, not from him, of the clean. He understood. The parasite did not only generate consciousness, it had become dependent on them. Daniel came back, vomiting blood into the chamber floor. Hand yanked the door open. Claire pulled the electrodes free while Bell shouted numbers at someone he could no longer see. The world flickered in and out around the edges. Emily, Daniel grasped. She's still there. They're all there. Claire pressed gauze to his mouth. Stay still. Bell leaned forward over him. Can they return? I don't know. Did you see the organism? Daniel grasped Bell's sleeve. It's not cleansing us that scares it. It's emptiness. Bell froze. Claire looked up sharply. What? Daniel coughed again. The clean state, it can't live there. No anchor, no self. Nothing to build from. Bell straightened slowly. Every line in his face tightened into awful focus. Then a cleansing wave wouldn't just erase consciousness, it would starve the parasite. Claire stared at him. Walter? He was already moving the console. If we induce global inert residence. No! Claire's voice crackled like a gunshot. No! Bell turned, a wild and bright, with the kind of certainty that ruins men. Don't you see? We could end it all. All of it. The cycle, the births, the suffering, the displacements, the reincarnation trap. But we're wiping humanity clean. By freeing the particles? Daniel pushed himself upright despite the pain searing through his chest. That's murder. Bell's faced him fully now. What if it's mercy? Claire stepped between them. You don't get to call extinction mercy because math comforts you. Outside, an explosion boomed somewhere above ground. Dust shivered from the ceiling tiles. Security alarms changed tone. A technician burst in the lab. They have breached the east access. Protesters and armed civilians are heading for the core. Bell barely seemed to hear him. Claire did not. Seal the tower lower doors. Move every patient to internal lockdown. The technician ran. Bell looked at the central chamber and then at the banks of resonant amplifiers surrounding it. Daniel saw the decision arrive before Bell moved. No, Daniel said. Bell's hand slammed the safety shield closed over the master controls. Claire lunged for him. He shoved her back hard enough that she hit the rail. I'm sorry, he said, and for the first time, he sounded sincere enough to make it worse. But I will not let the species keep calling a cage a miracle. He keyed in the override. The warning lights flashed in the lab in white. Claire scrambled up, shouting for the manual cutoff. Daniel forced himself towards the console, vision tunneling. Bell worked with terrifying speed, opening the resin chambers far beyond the safe limits. On the wall screen, live city data began populating in expanding circles. Hospitals, clinics, transit hubs, consumer devices carrying compatible field tech. The network was larger than Daniel had ever imagined. Too large. Bell's thumb hovered over the final command. Then the empty men from Kansas opened their eyes. All 6 of them began begging for the transfer after death, zipped inside black polymer shrouds near the rear wall. Now the shrouds moved. One tore open from the inside. A hand emerged, then another. Daniel stopped cold. The bodies set up together. Dead gray skin under white lab coats, eyes with reflected field glare. Bell stared. Claire whispered, "That's impossible." The bodies rose from their gurneys with slow puppet precision. Their mouths opened, and the humming returned, louder than before, drilling through the room. Bale clutched the edge of the console. "No!" The nearest corpse smiled at the same terrible smile. All 6 spoke together, not empty though. The master console overloaded. Sparks erupted across the boards. Bale jerked back, smoking blood blooming through his shirt, where current crossed his chest. He collapsed again on the floor, grasping the rails, gasping for air. The bodies lurched forward as one. Claire grabbed a fire axe from the wall cabinet and met the first corpse at the shoulders with a swing so brutal, Daniel heard bones split over the alarms. The body fell. The other 5 kept coming. Daniel reached Bale, seized him under the arms, and dragged him clear of the sparking console. Bale coughed, a face ashen. "Finish it." "No," Daniel said, "I cannot." Bale's eyes filled with something close to pleading. "If you leave this thing alive, it keeps making people." "It also makes people." Bale laughed once the blood ran from the corner of his mouth. "That's a tragedy, Daniel." Claire buried the axe in a second corpse's neck. The body kept moving with the blade lodged halfway through. She tore free and swung again. The lab doors blew inward. Armed civilians flooded the threshold, some wearing anti-cleansing slogans, others carrying homemade purifier symbols painted in white. The movement had splintered into fractions and arrived at the same violence by different roads. Nobody understood what they were seeing. The first gunshot shattered a glass wall of the observation room. Then everything dissolved. Later, Daniel never remembered exactly how the final sequence fit together. Fragments stayed. Claire screaming for the backup coils. One of the dead men reaching for her with charred fingers. A protester kneeling beside Hannah in a room 12 and weeping because he finally understood what freedom looked like when stripped of slogans. Bell crawled towards ruined console, still trying to finish the equation with a numbed hand. And above all, the humming. Daniel reached the chamber because there was nowhere else left to go. The manual interface still worked. Primitive, local only, no network spread. Claire saw what he was doing and shouted across the room, "Daniel, wait!" He looked at the settings. Resonance inversion. Not a cleaning pulse. A reversal. More like a drag on the line itself. If Bale had been right about one thing, it was that the path existed both ways. Claire stumbled to the chamber door, blood down one side of her face. "It could pull them back," she said, breathing hard. "Or it could pull more of them through." Daniel thought of Emily in the dark in between lines. Thought of thousands dimmed beside her. Thought of Bill calling the world a cage, and the organism saying we became. Maybe that was the whole horror. Maybe that was a mercy too. There had never been a clean line between invader and self. Not anymore. Maybe not for a very long time. "We don't get to erase each other," Daniel said. Claire stood before he finished the sentence. He triggered the inversion. The chamber lit from within like frozen lightning. Every active particle in the lab flared. Daniel felt his own chest tear open with light. Across the ward above, machines screamed. Somewhere in the city, millions must have stopped cold and clutched their hearts. The humming broke, not ended, broke, as though the choir had forgotten the song. The dead men collapsed. Hannah, in room 12, convulsed, once so violently her bed rails bent. Bell, sprawled near the wrecked console, looked up with wide eyes as a point of light rose from his chest and split into threads, one dim, one inert, drifting upward. The other one burned bright and vanished into him again. He inhaled, like a drowning man hitting air. Then he started to sob. Claire stared at him, and Daniel knew it had worked, at least once. The chamber walls cracked. He saw the web again for one impossible instant. The crossing lines, the drifting lights, the vast filamented organism, recoiling from the sudden reversal like a creature burned, and Emily turning toward him, now trapped, moving, coming fast. The chamber exploded. When Daniel awoke, daylight was pouring through broken upper windows. The institute smelled like burning plastic, blood, and rain. Claire was asleep in the chair beside his bed with bandages on both hands, and Belle was gone. For one suspended moment, Daniel did not know if anything had changed, or if the entire night had simply been another kind of collapse. And then he heard a voice from the doorway. "Danny?" He turned. Emily stood there in borrowed scrubs, pale and shaky, very, very present. He started crying before she crossed the room. She did too. They reached each other in the middle and held on hard enough to bruise each other. Later, when the official stories came, they were small and ugly and incomplete. Domestic terrorism incident, a classified biomedical event, unlicensed neurological procedures. The language tried its best to make everything seem ordinary again. It failed. Too many people have seen too much. Some of the cleanse returned after the inversion, some did not. Some came back altered, carrying dreams of crossing lines and distant voices and hunger they could never quite describe. Some woke with memories that were not entirely their own. Some infants born following year looked at empty corners and smiled at nothing that their parents could see. The cleansing clinics vanished underground. New religions sprang up around the discovery, then fractured, then hardened into arguments. A few governments outlawed residence work entirely. One pursued it in secret. The markets recovered. The talk shows adapted. Humanity proved, as always, that it could metabolize any horror if given enough time and enough smaller distractions. Bell survived, though he resigned before anyone could fire him. In his final public statement, he said only this: "We are not infected by meaning. We are made inside of it." No one was satisfied with that line, which was perhaps why it endured. Months later, Daniel and Emily stood in the shore of Lake Superior under a hard gray sky. The wind cut through their coats and like little knives across the water. Emily had started painting again. Daniel had quit his job and never explained why. Some events, they still sat in silence because words could not carry the weight of what had happened without cracking beneath it. Emily skipped a stone across the black water. It sank after one bounce. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked. "The place between?" She nodded. "All the time." She tucked her hands into her pockets. "Do you think it's still out there?" Daniel watched the lake, watched the light move across its broken sheets. "Yes." "The Parasite?" "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment, and then Daniel said, "Do you think we're sick?" Daniel could have lied for comfort. He could have said no, we're human. That's enough. Could have handed her one of the old stories and let them both live inside it for a while. Instead, he told her the truth he trusted anymore. "I think," he said, "whatever started this stopped being the whole story a long time ago." Emily looked at him. "The infection built the host," he said. "When the host looked back, then it loved things. Then it feared death. Then it wrote songs and buried its children and painted on cave walls and asked what it was for. Maybe none of that was the plan. Maybe there never was a plan." The wind carried the smell of cold water and pine. Emily's eyes shone, but was smiling a little. "So what are we?" Daniel looked out over the vast dark lake and thought of inert particles drifting through the universe, clean and silent and harmless. He thought of the bright ones too, burning with impossible attachments. Then he thought of his sister standing beside him in the cold, alive, in every way that mattered. An accident, he said. We waited. He took a breath. An accident that learned to care. Above them, the clouds shifted. For a second, the sun broke through in pale white bands crossing over the lake water, like lines from unreachable places. Emily slipped her arm through his. Neither of them spoke again. The lake moved, the light moved, the world infected with awareness kept going. And somewhere, far beyond sight, in the dark stars between, countless clean particles drifted untouched through the silent universe, waiting for nothing at all. While here, on one small world full of frightened and miraculous hosts, consciousness endured like a wound that had decided it wanted to heal.